The sheriff exposed their authorization in minutes at 5:26 one cold New Mexico morning. I found 3 men in tactical vests blocking my ranch gate beneath flashing amber lights. They called themselves the Mesa Vista Community Access Patrol and claimed my private road was now under HOA authority. There was just one problem. Walker Ranch had never belonged to their HOA. I called Sheriff Thomas Reed, started recording, and asked who gave them jurisdiction over my land. Then their supervisor smiled and said something that changed everything. Next month, you won't be allowed to close this road anyway. He knew something I didn't, and by the time I discovered what Mesa Vista, its president, and a wealthy developer were planning beyond that gate, a fake patrol would be the smallest part of the story. Stay with me, because the old deed my father left behind turned their entire plan upside down. And if you enjoy stories about ordinary landowners standing firm with evidence, patience, and the law on their side, consider subscribing. There are plenty more roads like this one ahead. At 5:26 that morning, somebody blocked my ranch gate, not knocked on it, not parked near it, blocked it. I woke to the vibration of the motion alert on my nightstand, pulled on my jeans, and checked the north gate camera before my boots were even tied. 3 men stood across the entrance to Walker Ranch in gray tactical vests. Behind them sat a white SUV with amber lights flashing against the cattle fence. A portable barricade stretched across my driveway. Printed across their backs were 4 words, Mesa Vista, Community Access Patrol. I stared at the screen for a second longer than I needed to. Mesa Vista Estates sat 3 miles west of my property. Their HOA had about as much authority over Walker Ranch as I had over the governor's office in Santa Fe. I grabbed my phone, keys, and the small body camera I kept in the pickup. Then I headed out. The air had that sharp, early morning bite New Mexico gets before the sun clears the ridge. Gravel cracked under my tires as I drove toward the gate. The 3 men watched me approach but didn't move the barricade. That told me plenty. I stopped 20 feet away and stepped out with my phone already recording. "Morning," I said. "You planning to tell me why you're blocking my driveway?" The man in the center stepped forward. I recognized him, Mark Reynolds, 48, Vice President of Mesa Vista Estates HOA. I'd seen him at county meetings before, usually sitting behind Diane Caldwell and nodding whenever she spoke. Mark looked different that morning. The vest helped. So did the radio clipped to his shoulder. "Mr. Walker," he said, like we were meeting at a bank instead of at my gate before sunrise. "This entrance is temporarily restricted under emergency access authority." I looked at the barricade, then at him. "Whose emergency?" One of the men shifted his weight. Mark didn't. "Mesa Vista has designated Dry Creek Lane as a community emergency corridor." I almost laughed. Instead, I lifted my phone a little higher. "You want to say that again for the camera?" His eyes flicked toward the lens. "Dry Creek Lane is subject to emergency access control. By your HOA, by authorized community personnel." That was the kind of language people used when they wanted to sound official without saying anything that could survive a records request. I walked toward the gate slowly, not toward Mark, toward the barricade. A laminated sheet had been zip-tied to it. County seal at the top, bold lettering beneath. Temporary access control notice. I took 3 photographs. Mark stepped closer. "You don't have permission to photograph operational documents." That got a smile out of me. "You're standing on my property." He stiffened. I pointed down at the cattle guard under his boots. "That steel belongs to me. The gravel under it belongs to me. The fence behind you belongs to me. And the road you're blocking belongs to Walker Ranch. That's under review." "No, it isn't." He pulled a folded packet from the plastic case and handed it toward me. I didn't take it. "Hold it up." "What?" "Hold it where the camera can see it." His jaw tightened, but he did. The first page referenced regional emergency access coordination and something called an expanded compliance zone. There was a county authorization number near the bottom. I zoomed in, and captured it. Years earlier, before I came back to the ranch full-time, I'd worked road maintenance for the county. I knew how actual county access orders looked. This wasn't one, too many logos, not enough names, no department to contact, no recording stamp, just enough paper to scare somebody who didn't know better. I looked at Mark. "Who signed your authorization?" He paused. Only half a second, but I noticed. "The appropriate county office." "Which office?" "You can address that through Mesa Vista Council." "No," my voice stayed flat. "You drove onto Walker Ranch before daylight, put a barricade across my gate, and claimed government authority. I'm asking you once. Who gave your HOA authority over land 3 miles outside your subdivision?" The other 2 men stopped pretending not to listen. Mark glanced toward the SUV, then he smiled. It wasn't friendly. It was the smile of a man who thought he knew the ending before I did. "You've been difficult about access for a long time, Ethan." That was the first thing he said that bothered me. Not because it was threatening, because it was specific. I haven't had an access dispute with Mesa Vista, not yet. There it was. I let the silence sit. Beyond the fence, cattle moved slowly through the pasture. One of them bumped the wire and made the cedar posts creak. Mark lowered the paperwork. "This road situation is changing." "How? You'll be notified." "When?" His smile widened just a fraction. "By next month. You won't be allowed to close this road anyway." For the first time that morning, I felt real anger. Not hot anger, the useful kind, cold enough to make you start remembering details. I looked past Mark toward Dry Creek Lane. It ran south from the gate, crossed Walker Ranch, then bent west toward Cottonwood Wash before disappearing behind a low ridge. Mesa Vista had limited access over one section during seasonal flooding. 6 original homes, that was all. My father had explained that agreement to me years ago. Residential passage, emergency circumstances. Nothing about HOA patrols. Nothing about barricades. And definitely nothing about Mark Reynolds telling me I was about to lose control of my own road. I pulled up Sheriff Thomas Reed's number. Mark watched me. "Calling somebody?" "Yeah, won't change anything. We'll find out." Thomas answered on the 3rd ring. "Reed. Tom, it's Ethan Walker." His voice sharpened immediately. "What's wrong?" "I've got 3 men from Mesa Vista blocking my north gate. Tactical vests, amber lights, portable barricade. They're claiming county-backed emergency authority." A pause. "Names? Mark Reynolds is one." Mark's smile disappeared. Thomas said, "You safe?" "I'm fine. Anybody armed?" "Not that I can see." "Don't move their vehicle. Don't touch their equipment. Keep recording." "Already am. I'm on my way." The call ended. Mark folded his arms. "You really think the sheriff is going to settle a land use matter on the side of a dirt road?" "No." I slipped the phone back into my pocket. "But I think he's going to be very interested in why 3 private HOA employees are wearing tactical vests and claiming county authority before sunrise." One of Mark's men looked toward him. That was the first crack, small but real. Mark recovered quickly. "You don't understand what's coming. Then explain it." He said nothing. I stepped closer to the gate. Not enough to threaten him, enough to make sure he understood I wasn't leaving. The north gate had stood there longer than Mesa Vista Estates had existed. My father had rehung it twice. I'd replaced the hinges after he died. There were things on a ranch you owned because you bought them. And there were things you carried because someone before you trusted you to keep them standing. That gate was both. Mark checked his watch. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. I haven't done anything yet." His eyes met mine. That answer bothered him more than anger would have. Then one of the men behind him opened the rear hatch of the SUV. Inside were steel posts, a sledgehammer, survey flags, and a battery-powered driver. They hadn't come just to block my road. They had come prepared to put something permanent beside it. I looked back at Mark. He didn't smile this time. Somewhere beyond the ridge, The first line of sunlight touched the desert. Sheriff Reed was on his way, but Mark Reynolds had already told me the one thing that mattered. By next month, he believed my road would no longer be mine to close. And standing there at 5:26 in the morning, watching his men unload steel onto Walker Ranch, I realized the barricade wasn't the real problem. It was only the first move. One of Mark's men carried a steel marker toward the fence line, while the other unloaded the battery driver. I raised my phone. "Don't put that in the ground." Mark stepped between us. "We're marking the emergency corridor." "No. You're altering private property after I've told you to leave. You're obstructing authorized work. Then your authorization better be real." That stopped him for half a beat. I kept recording. The worker hesitated with the steel post in his hands. Mark snapped, "Install it." The man moved toward the shoulder. That's when the driver of their SUV tried repositioning closer to the gate. He backed up too fast. I heard the cedar post crack before I saw it move. The rear bumper hit the fence corner and snapped a weathered post near the base. Wire dropped hard into the dirt. 3 heifers scattered away from the sudden noise, and a young calf near the opening spun toward Dry Creek Lane. "Stop the vehicle!" The SUV stopped. The calf didn't. It caught itself against the fallen wire, stumbled, then pulled free and limped several yards before stopping. My stomach tightened. I started toward it. Mark grabbed my attention with the worst possible sentence. "Your livestock shouldn't be this close to a designated access corridor." I turned. "Say that again." He didn't. Good choice. I kept the camera on him, then called my ranch hand, who lived 15 minutes south, and told him I needed help securing the cattle. I wasn't giving Mark a confrontation he could edit into whatever story Diane Caldwell wanted later. The calf was standing. That was enough for the next few minutes. Then dust rose beyond the gate. A county cruiser came down the road and stopped behind the white SUV. Sheriff Thomas Reed stepped out. Thomas was 58 and had spent enough years dealing with land disputes to know that the loudest person usually wasn't the one holding the strongest document. He looked at the barricade, then the tactical vests, then my broken fence. "Morning, Ethan." "Tom." Mark walked toward him immediately. "Sheriff Reed." "Mark Reynolds, Mesa Vista Community Access Patrol." Thomas looked at the lettering on his vest. "That's a private HOA patrol. We're operating under county-supported Emergency Access Authority. Show me." Mark produced the laminated notice. Thomas didn't argue with him, didn't lecture him. He took out his phone. That was when Mark's confidence changed, just slightly. Thomas read the authorization number into dispatch. We waited. Nobody spoke. The radio answered less than a minute later. Thomas asked them to repeat it. Dispatch did. He looked at Mark. "That authorization number belongs to a drainage inspection." Mark blinked. "What?" "County drainage inspection. Closed 6 years ago." "That can't be right." Thomas turned the sheet over. No issuing department. No current official's signature. No recorded access order. Mark pointed toward Dry Creek Lane. "Mesa Vista has an easement. An easement isn't police power. It's community access. That isn't what I asked." Thomas handed the notice back. "Do you have any document authorizing Mesa Vista Estates HOA to exercise enforcement authority on Walker Ranch?" Mark's mouth tightened. Our counsel advised, yes or no. Silence. Thomas nodded once, then pack it up and leave. One of the men immediately lowered the steel marker. Mark didn't move. "Sheriff, this is an established emergency corridor. Maybe there's an easement. Maybe there isn't. That's a civil property question. And we'll look at the recorded document if somebody wants to dispute it." He pointed at the broken fence. "But you don't get to invent enforcement authority while we're figuring it out." Mark's face reddened. "We were performing a safety function. You blocked a private gate with a document using an unrelated county authorization number." Thomas looked toward the SUV. "And now you've damaged a fence." The driver stared at the ground. Thomas turned to me. "You get all of it? From the minute I arrived. Keep the original files. I will. He walked over to the broken post and photographed it himself. Then he photographed the tire marks, the barricade, the steel markers, and the calf standing stiffly 20 yards away. The power had shifted without anybody raising his voice. 5 minutes earlier, Mark had been issuing orders. Now Sheriff Reed was building a record. Mark finally motioned to his men. Load it. They started packing the equipment. I moved toward the calf while Thomas stayed between me and the patrol. Up close, I could see a scrape along its lower leg, and the beginning of swelling, not catastrophic, but real and completely unnecessary. I photographed that too. When I stood again, Mark was beside the SUV. His men had removed the barricade. For the first time that morning, my gate was clear. "You've made your point," he said. "I didn't make anything. You drove here." His eyes narrowed. Diane Caldwell isn't going to appreciate being embarrassed like this. There it was, the name behind the morning. Diane Caldwell, president of Mesa Vista Estates. I'd met her twice at county meetings. Perfect hair, measured voice, always talking about property values and community standards as if they were constitutional principles. I looked at Mark. "Then Diane can call me herself. She won't need to." He opened the passenger door. "This isn't finished." Thomas heard him. Mark stopped. Sheriff Reed pointed toward County Road 16. "Your HOA is west." Then he pointed down at the dirt beneath Mark's boots. "Walker Ranch is here. Remember the difference." Mark climbed inside. The white SUV pulled away, carrying its tactical vests, steel posts, and fake authority back toward Mesa Vista. I watched until the amber lights disappeared. Thomas came beside me. "You recognize that county number?" "Not specifically. But I knew the paperwork looked wrong. Good instinct. Why use a fake authorization for a road easement?" Thomas looked down Dry Creek Lane. "That's what bothers me." He glanced toward the broken fence. "Get the calf checked. Save every receipt. Back up that video somewhere besides your phone. I already planned to." He gave me a tired half smile. "Your father would have done the same." That landed harder than I expected. Robert Walker had spent his life telling me fences weren't about keeping good neighbors out. They were about making sure everybody knew where responsibility changed hands. I looked toward the road Mark had tried to claim. "Tom," he said something before you arrived. "What?" He said by next month I wouldn't be allowed to close Dry Creek Lane. Thomas stopped. Exact words, close enough that they're on video. His expression hardened. "Send me a copy." "Why?" "Because people don't forge authority over something they don't intend to use." He climbed into his cruiser. Before closing the door, he looked back at me. "If Mesa Vista contacts you again, don't argue. Document." Then he drove away. The ranch went quiet. I stood beside the broken cedar post with the fake authorization photographed on my phone and an injured calf behind me. I'd gotten what should have felt like a victory. The sheriff had come. The patrol had left. My gate was open again, but Mark's warning kept circling back. Next month. Whatever Diane Caldwell wanted from Walker Ranch, she was apparently willing to send men onto private property with false county paperwork to get it. And that meant the question wasn't whether they knew the document was fake. The question was what they wanted badly enough to risk using it. By 8 that morning, I had stopped treating what happened as an argument and started treating it as a case. I photographed the broken cedar post from every angle, measured the tire tracks beside it, backed up the North Gate footage, and saved Sheriff Reed's incident number in 3 places. The calf was still favoring one leg, so I called Dr. Nolan Pierce, the veterinarian who had handled my cattle for years. He arrived before 10. After examining the leg, he looked toward the damaged fence. "What happened?" "HOA patrol." He stared at me. "You joined an HOA?" "No." "Then I'm already confused." "So am I." Fortunately, the injury looked treatable. Nolan documented the swelling, cleaned the scrape, and wrote everything into the veterinary report without speculation. Cause observed after fence collapse, time examined, treatment, expected follow-up. That report mattered more to me than any angry accusation could. By noon, the fence was temporarily secured. Then the ranch went quiet. That was when the house started feeling empty. My wife had been gone long enough that I no longer expected to hear her moving around the kitchen. But trouble had a way of waking old absences. My father, Robert, had been gone too. If either of them had been there, I knew exactly what they would have said. Don't argue about what you can prove. I was washing dust off my hands when the delivery truck stopped at the house. The driver handed me a thick, certified envelope. The return address belonged to a law firm in Albuquerque. Below it, Mesa Vista Estates Homeowners Association. I signed. The driver left. I opened the envelope standing at my kitchen counter. The first page was titled, Notice of Interference with Established Community Access. By the second paragraph, I understood what Diane was doing. According to Mesa Vista, Dry Creek Lane had served as an established emergency and community access route for years. My north gate supposedly created an unlawful obstruction. The letter demanded that I remove or permanently disable the gate within 14 days. Then came the threat. If I refused, Mesa Vista reserved the right to seek an injunction, damages, attorney fees, and emergency access relief. I read it twice, then a third time. They had sent men onto my land with false paperwork at dawn. They had broken my fence. Now I was being accused of interference. For about 30 seconds, I wanted to call Diane Caldwell myself. Instead, I photographed every page. Then I called Rachel Foster. Rachel had handled a boundary dispute for a neighboring ranch 3 years earlier. She didn't waste words and didn't confuse aggression with strategy. She answered, Rachel Foster, it's Ethan Walker. A pause. That doesn't sound like a social call. An HOA 3 miles away wants me to remove my ranch gate. Another pause. Start from the beginning. I did. The fake patrol, Mark Reynolds, the county authorization number, Sheriff Reed, the broken fence, the calf, then the 14-day demand. Rachel didn't interrupt until I finished. Do you still have the original envelope? Yes, keep it. I plan to. Video, backed up. Incident report, number saved, property documents. That question sent my eyes toward the hallway. I've got deeds, all of them. My father kept everything. Good. Don't answer Mesa Vista. Don't call Diane. Don't sign anything. Bring me every deed, easement, survey, road agreement, and piece of correspondence that mentions Dry Creek Lane. I looked again at the letter. They're calling it established community access. That phrase means nothing by itself. Some Mesa Vista homes do have access when Cottonwood Wash floods. How many? 6 original properties, as far as I remember. Residential? That's how Dad explained it. Then I want the recorded instrument, not anybody's memory of it. That was Rachel. Paper first, opinions later. I carried the phone down the hall and opened the storage room. Robert's old steel document box sat beneath a shelf exactly where I'd left it after settling the estate. Gray metal, scratched corners, enough to make you respect whatever was inside. I set it on the kitchen table. Rachel heard the latch snap open. You find something, about 40 years of my father's refusal to throw anything away. Today you should thank him. Inside were tax records, grazing agreements, surveys, old county correspondence, and folders labeled in Robert's block handwriting. I found one marked, Dry Creek, Mesa Vista. My pulse slowed. Achal, yeah, I've got a file. Don't start interpreting it. Bring it. I almost closed the box. Then I noticed a folded county map beneath the folder. I opened it. Dry Creek Lane was marked by hand in red pencil. Near Cottonwood Wash, my father had written a date and 2 words. Limited access. Nothing about community control. Nothing about HOA authority. And certainly nothing about removing the north gate. Rachel was quiet when I told her. Then she asked, Ethan, when did Mesa Vista first contact you about this road? This morning. Nothing before that. No negotiation. No request to widen it. No maintenance proposal. Nothing. Another silence. Then her voice changed. That bothers me more than the letter. Why? Because they skipped every normal step. I looked through the kitchen window toward the gate. Rachel continued. If this were really about 6 homeowners getting through during a flood, they'd be talking about access conditions. Instead, they sent a patrol, used false county paperwork, damaged your property, and demanded permanent removal of your gate. So nobody spends this much money fighting over a gate unless the gate is standing in front of something they want. I looked down at Robert's folder. 14 days suddenly felt less like a deadline and more like a countdown. The question wasn't whether Mesa Vista wanted access anymore. The question was what was waiting beyond my gate that had suddenly become valuable enough to take. Rachel answered part of that question the next morning. I met her at her office with Robert's steel document box strapped into the passenger seat of my pickup. She cleared half her conference table, then started sorting the contents into 3 piles: deeds, surveys, and recorded agreements. No guessing, no speeches, just paper. 20 minutes in, she found the folder labeled Dry Creek, Mesa Vista, and slid out a yellowed recorded instrument with the county clerk's stamp still visible in the corner. There it is, she said. I leaned closer. The agreement had been signed decades earlier, when Mesa Vista was little more than a handful of homes west of Cottonwood Wash. Rachel read the operative section aloud. 6 specifically identified residential parcels were permitted to use a narrow portion of Dry Creek Lane when seasonal flooding made their regular route temporarily impassable. Then she stopped. Here, her finger moved lower. The easement prohibited commercial traffic, construction use, subdivision expansion, road widening, and any public dedication without written consent from the Walker property owner. I sat back. So Mark's emergency corridor doesn't exist. The HOA's permanent access claim, not in this document, and they want the gate removed anyway. Rachel nodded, which means your father's agreement is a problem for them. She copied the instrument, then called Samuel Ortiz. Samuel had spent more than 30 years surveying roads, ranch boundaries, and subdivision plats around the county before retiring. He had known my father and had worked near Mesa Vista when some of its original lots were being recorded. He met us that afternoon at the ranch. Samuel climbed out of an old tan pickup carrying a hard map tube and a tablet. "Robert still making trouble from beyond the grave?" he asked. "Looks that way." "Good. Keeps the rest of us employed." Rachel handed him the easement. He read it beside the hood of my truck, then looked toward Dry Creek Lane. "Let's see what somebody's trying to change." We spent the next hour comparing old plat lines against current county mapping. At first, nothing jumped out. Mesa Vista ended where I expected it to. Walker Ranch remained outside the subdivision. Dry Creek Lane stayed private. Then Samuel enlarged a planning layer on his tablet. A new set of pale parcel lines appeared beyond Mesa Vista's existing western edge. "What is that?" I asked. Samuel didn't answer immediately. He zoomed in. A label appeared. Mesa Vista, Phase 2 Preliminary Development Area. Rachel leaned closer. "How recent?" Planning layer was added less than 2 months ago. I felt something settle cold in my chest. There were dozens of proposed residential lots, new internal streets, drainage infrastructure, and one broad dashed route leading toward County Road 16. The route crossed existing Mesa Vista land. Then it turned east, straight toward my north gate. Samuel traced it with one finger. "Heavy equipment needs a reliable way in." Rachel looked at me. "What's their other option?" Samuel switched layers, build a new access from the southwest. Problem? Big one. He enlarged the terrain map. They'd have to span a drainage cut, improve nearly a mile of unstable grade, and probably obtain additional environmental review. Cost? Enough that someone would rather use Ethan's road. I looked from the tablet toward Dry Creek Lane. The road my father had allowed 6 families to use during floods suddenly looked different. Not because the dirt had changed, because the motive had. Rachel tapped the proposed Phase 2 route. If they can characterize Dry Creek as established community infrastructure, they don't have to negotiate with Ethan from scratch. Samuel nodded. And if they can get regular HOA traffic using it before approvals are finalized, they can start creating the appearance of broader use. The fake patrol flashed through my mind, the barricade, the tactical vests, the steel markers, marks saying that by next month I wouldn't be allowed to close the road. They weren't enforcing anything, I said. Rachel looked at me. They were trying to establish something. Samuel folded his arms. Usage, I stared at their map. A limited emergency easement had been turned into a phrase, community access, then emergency corridor, then, if nobody stopped them, maybe public infrastructure. Every step sounded small. Together, they could erase the difference between permission and ownership. Rachel took photographs of the planning map and downloaded the public filing information. Who submitted Phase 2? Samuel opened the development record. For a moment, none of us said anything. Then he turned the screen toward me. Canyon Ridge Development Group. I didn't recognize the company name. Rachel did. Her expression changed. Victor Hale, who? Developer. Big projects around Santa Fe and Albuquerque. Aggressive land deals, expensive lawyers. Samuel gave a low whistle. Then Diane Caldwell isn't the person with the most money in this fight. That mattered. Until that moment, I'd been looking at Mesa Vista like it was the entire problem. It wasn't. The HOA was the hand at my gate. Someone else was supplying the reason. Rachel gathered the copies into a folder. Don't contact Victor. I wasn't planning to. Don't confront Diane either. What do we do? We document the development filing, preserve the easement, and make them explain why an HOA patrol was trying to create authority over the exact road their developer needs. Samuel looked toward the north gate. There's another thing, I turned. If somebody's planning to widen that route, I want to resurvey the entire interface between Mesa Vista and Walker Ranch. Why? Because the old plats out here weren't drawn with satellite equipment. He tapped his tablet. And developments have a habit of getting comfortable with boundaries nobody checks. That sentence stayed with me. The patrol had come to my gate pretending this was about safety. The 14-day letter pretended it was about existing residents. Now a development map showed something else entirely. Diane wasn't protecting 6 families from a flooded wash. She was helping somebody turn my private ranch road into the cheapest construction entrance for a new subdivision. And if Canyon Ridge Development Group was the money behind Phase 2, then the next question had changed. It wasn't what Mesa Vista wanted anymore. It was who Victor Hale was, and how far he was willing to go to get a road I had never agreed to give him. I got my answer 2 days later. A black pickup rolled through the ranch entrance just after 9 in the morning. Clean paint, clean tires, no company logo. The man who stepped out wore dark jeans, polished boots, and the kind of calm expression that comes from being used to other people moving when you ask them to. Mr. Walker? That's me, Victor Hale, I already knew. He smiled like we were meeting over coffee. I'm hoping we can solve this before everybody spends unnecessary money. I looked at the north gate behind him. Funny. Your people started with a barricade. Not my people. Your development needs my road. That wiped a little polish off the smile. Victor glanced toward Dry Creek Lane. I think there's been some confusion about access. There hasn't. He opened a leather folder and handed me a 3-page agreement. I read the first paragraph standing there. Mesa Vista Estates would receive permanent, non-exclusive access over Dry Creek Lane for community, emergency, service, and development-related purposes. Development-related. There it was. In return, Canyon Ridge Development Group would pay me a lump sum and assume maintenance responsibility for part of the road. Victor watched my face. It's a generous number. I didn't ask for a number. Everybody has one. No, He tilted his head. That's not usually true. I handed the agreement back. Then you're usually talking to somebody else. His smile disappeared entirely. You're sitting on the most practical access point for Phase 2. That's your problem. It becomes everyone's problem if emergency access stays uncertain. 6 homes have emergency access when Cottonwood Wash floods. That's what the recorded agreement says. He studied me more carefully, so he hadn't expected me to know the document. Those arrangements evolve. Recorded property rights don't evolve because a developer needs cheaper grading. His jaw tightened. You're taking this personally. You sent an HOA patrol to block my gate. I told you. Those weren't my employees. Then you won't mind if Sheriff Reed keeps investigating who authorized them. That landed. Not hard, but enough. Victor closed the folder. You should think about the offer. I already did. He turned toward his truck, then stopped. Development doesn't stop because one landowner dislikes it. Neither does ownership. For the first time, the mask slipped. Just a little. You're going to make this expensive. I looked at him. For who? He didn't answer. He drove away. By the next afternoon, the first complaint arrived. County Environmental Services. Anonymous report alleging cattle runoff was entering Cottonwood Wash. I called the inspector myself. He came out, walked the drainage line, took photographs, and found nothing that required action. The next morning, a second complaint appeared. Unsafe roadside fencing, then a third. Blocked emergency access, then a fourth. Excessive machinery noise affecting nearby residents. That one almost made me laugh. The nearest Mesa Vista house was miles from my equipment yard. Rachel didn't laugh. I forwarded every notice to her. 20 minutes later, she called. Look at the timestamps. I opened the files. 3 complaints had been submitted within a 40-minute window. The fourth came less than an hour later. Coordinated, I said. Looks that way. Can we prove Diane filed them? Not yet, Victor, not yet. I hated those 2 words. Not yet, Rachel continued. But this is useful. Being buried in complaints is useful? If they all arrive right after you reject Victor's access agreement, yes. That shifted my thinking. I stopped reading the complaints as threats. I started reading them as evidence. This inspector who came to Walker Ranch got the same treatment. Full access to whatever they were legally entitled to inspect. No argument, no hostility, and a written request for the complaint record. By the end of the week, 3 of the 4 allegations had already been closed without violation. The emergency access complaint remained open only because county staff wanted to review the recorded easement. Rachel welcomed that. Good, she said. Let them read the actual document. The pressure wasn't working the way Victor expected, but it was still pressure. I lost mornings to inspections, afternoons to calls, evenings to scanning records. The ranch didn't stop needing work because Diane Caldwell decided to turn paperwork into a weapon. One evening, I sat alone at the kitchen table, with 4 complaint files spread beside Robert's steel document box. The house felt too quiet. That was when being widowed hit hardest. Not during funerals, not during anniversaries, during fights you shouldn't have had to carry alone. I looked at the old handwriting on my father's folder. Dry Creek, Mesa Vista. He had dealt with neighbors. I was dealing with a system built to make exhaustion look like consent. My phone rang, unknown number. I almost let it go. Then I answered. Walker, a woman's voice came through low and tight. Is this Ethan Walker? My name is Grace Miller. I live in Mesa Vista. I sat straighter. What can I do for you? Nothing. She hesitated. I think I can do something for you. I didn't speak. Grace lowered her voice further. You need to know what Diane said before she sent those men to your gate. The room seemed to narrow around that sentence. What did she say? Not over the phone. When? Tomorrow evening. Where? Not in Mesa Vista. Then she added one more thing. Victor Hale was in the room when she said it. The call ended. I stared at the dark screen in my hand. Victor had tried money, then paperwork. Now somebody inside Mesa Vista was frightened enough to meet me in secret. And for the first time, I had a chance to learn whether the fake patrol had been intimidation or part of a plan they had already put in writing. Grace Miller chose the meeting place, a roadside diner off County Road 16, far enough from Mesa Vista that nobody would casually notice her truck beside mine. Rachel arrived first. Grace came 10 minutes later. She was 44, dressed like she'd come straight from work, and nervous enough to check the parking lot twice before sitting down. "I don't want Diane knowing I'm here." Rachel closed her notebook. "Then we start with something important. Don't give us anything you obtained illegally. Tell us only what you personally saw or heard." Grace nodded. "I was there." "Where?" "The board meeting." She looked at me. "3 nights before Mark blocked your gate." That got my attention. Grace explained that Mesa Vista's board had called a closed session supposedly concerning emergency preparedness and road access. She had been invited because she'd volunteered on a neighborhood planning committee. Diane Caldwell was there, Mark Reynolds was there, and halfway through the meeting, Victor Hale walked in. "He had maps," Grace said. "Big development maps. Phase 2? Rachel asked. Grace nodded. "He told the board Canyon Ridge couldn't keep the project financially viable if they had to build the southwest entrance. Exactly what Samuel had suspected." I leaned forward. "What did he say about Dry Creek Lane?" Grace wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "He called it the solution." Rachel's pen moved. "Exact words if you remember them." Grace thought for a moment. "He said the road already had a history of community use. Diane said the problem was that the HOA didn't control that use. And Mark?" He asked how they changed that. Grace looked directly at me. "That's when Victor said they needed to establish a history of community control before Phase 2 became public." The diner noise seemed to fade. I thought about the barricade, the tactical vests, the steel marker, emergency access authority. They hadn't been improvising. "What did Diane say?" Grace swallowed. "She said they could start treating Dry Creek Lane like an HOA-managed access route. Inspections, safety checks, emergency designations. She said if they did it consistently, it would become harder for you to argue the HOA had no role there." Rachel stopped writing. "Did anyone mention the recorded easement?" "Yes." "Who?" "Victor." Grace's voice dropped. "He said the existing easement was too narrow for construction traffic." There it was. Not confusion, knowledge. Victor knew exactly what Robert's agreement allowed and exactly what it prohibited. Rachel asked, "Did they discuss changing the easement legally?" Grace gave a humorless laugh. "Diane asked whether you would sign. What did Victor say?" "Probably not." I could almost hear him saying it. Grace continued. "Then Diane said pressure changes people's definition of reasonable, the complaints, the 14-day letter, Victor's offer." Every piece clicked into place. Rachel leaned back. "Grace, why are you telling us this?" For the first time, Grace looked ashamed. "Because I didn't stop it. You weren't running the board. I still sat there." She looked at me. "My family is one of the 6 households." That surprised me. "When Cottonwood Wash floods," she said, "we use Dry Creek Lane. My husband used it before he died. I've used it with my daughter." She paused. "Your father never gave us trouble. Neither did you." "No. And Diane told people you were trying to cut off emergency access. She made you sound like you wanted families trapped." My anger sharpened. "That's not true. I know." Grace reached into her bag, but stopped before removing anything. "I have meeting notices and emails Diane sent to residents afterward. Nothing secret. Things sent directly to me," Rachel nodded. "Those we can review." Grace handed her several printed pages. One described an effort to formalize community stewardship of Dry Creek Lane. Another referred to future connectivity needs. No Phase 2, no Canyon Ridge, no Victor Hale. Rachel photographed each page, then Grace pointed to a date. "That's the morning after the closed meeting. The email had gone out before Mark ever reached my gate. The sequence mattered. Planning, language, patrol, Pressure. Rachel looked at me. They were building a record. I nodded. They wanted their own misconduct to become evidence. Grace frowned. What does that mean? Rachel answered. If Mesa Vista repeatedly patrols the road, marks it, regulates it, and sends vehicles over it without Ethan challenging them, Victor may later try to point to that behavior as evidence that the road functions as broader community infrastructure. But Ethan did challenge them, immediately. For the first time that evening, Grace smiled. Then Mark really picked the wrong rancher. I didn't smile back, because I understood something worse. Mark's fake patrol hadn't failed just because Sheriff Reed sent them away. It had failed before that. My camera had captured me objecting from the beginning. The sheriff had documented their lack of authority. The county had a record of the false authorization. And now Grace could connect the patrol to a meeting held 3 days earlier. Their attempt to manufacture history had created a history all right. Just not the one they wanted. Outside, Rachel stopped beside my pickup. We send formal notice tomorrow. To who? Diane, Mark, Victor, Mesa Vista's attorney, Canyon Ridge. What does it say? That the 6 households keep every legitimate right they already have. I nodded. And that nobody else gets 1 inch. She shut her folder. No HOA patrol, no commercial traffic, no construction equipment, no widening, no new markers, no invented authority. Grace had already started her truck when Rachel added, after that, nobody can claim misunderstanding. I looked across County Road 16 toward the dark desert. And if they come anyway? Rachel's expression hardened. Then they stopped being confused. She opened her car door. They become documented trespassers. The next morning, the notices went out. For several days, nothing happened. No complaints, no patrol vehicles, no calls from Victor. The silence almost felt like retreat, but men like Victor Hale didn't spend that much money just to walk away from the cheapest road into a subdivision. And now that we'd formally told him where his rights ended, his next move would answer the question that mattered most. Would he respect the boundary, or cross it, knowing exactly what it meant? I got the answer at 6:40 Monday morning. The first thing I heard was diesel, not one engine, several. I stepped onto the porch and saw dust rising beyond the north gate. 2 dump trucks came first, followed by a grader, a survey pickup, and Victor Hale's black truck. They stopped in a line outside Walker Ranch. No HOA patrol this time. No gray vests. This was heavier, more expensive, and harder to explain away. I grabbed my phone and drove down. Samuel Ortiz had been working the boundary for 3 days, and one of his fresh survey stakes stood beside the gate, bright orange ribbons snapping in the morning air. Victor was already out of his truck when I arrived. He looked almost cheerful. Morning, Ethan. Victor, a construction foreman, stood nearby with a clipboard. 2 surveyors waited beside their equipment. Victor held up a document. We have temporary construction access authorization from Mesa Vista. I didn't take it. Rachel served you, notice Friday. I read it. So you know construction traffic isn't covered by the easement. We disagree. That's what courtrooms are for. He glanced toward the trucks. Work schedules don't always wait for courtrooms. That told me everything. He wasn't confused. He was testing whether money and momentum could create the result before anyone stopped him. Victor handed the authorization to the foreman. Proceed. The foreman looked at me. I pointed to Samuel's stake. That marker is the surveyed Walker boundary. Rachel Foster gave Canyon Ridge written notice that commercial and construction access is prohibited. Victor exhaled. Ethan, don't turn this into theater. You brought a grader to my gate. The foreman didn't move. Good man, he understood liability. Victor stepped closer. This road has been used by Mesa Vista for decades. 6 households, during flooding, residential passage. Use is use. No, rights have limits. Victor's jaw tightened. Your father understood cooperation. That one landed harder than he intended. I kept my voice even. My father understood permission. You're the one confusing it with ownership. The foreman folded his arms. Mr. Hale, I need clarity before I cross, Victor snapped. You have authorization from the property owner? Silence. Victor turned toward him, from Mesa Vista. The foreman looked back at me. Then I'm staying here. For the first time, Victor lost control of the scene. Not much, just enough. He pulled out his phone. Before he could make the call, another engine came up behind the convoy. Sheriff Thomas Reed. He parked sideways near the gate and stepped out carrying a folder. Victor stared at me. You called him? Rachel copied his office on the notice. Thomas walked over. Morning. Victor held up the HOA authorization. Sheriff, we're here under established community access rights. Thomas didn't even reach for the paper. I've already reviewed the recorded easement. Victor's face changed. Thomas continued. Existing residential access during seasonal flooding. No construction traffic. No subdivision expansion. No widening. This is temporary work. Temporary trucks are still construction traffic. Victor pointed toward Dry Creek Lane. Mesa Vista has used that road for decades. That doesn't let Canyon Ridge expand the easement. Victor's voice hardened. You're making a legal determination in the field. No, the document already made it. Thomas looked at the foreman. If you cross onto Walker Ranch without permission, after written notice, Ethan can document the entry and pursue trespass remedies. I'm not ordering your equipment onto private land. That was enough. The foreman turned to his drivers. Hold position. Victor's eyes went cold. You realize what this delay costs? Thomas shrugged. Probably less than building on land you don't control. One of the surveyors looked away to hide a smile. Victor turned on me. This isn't over, I know. Then why are you smiling? I hadn't realized I was. I pointed toward Samuel's orange stake. You should have checked where Samuel put that. Victor looked at it, then past it, toward the drainage culvert near Mesa Vista's rear entrance. His expression shifted, small, but unmistakable. He knew there was something he hadn't seen yet. Thomas noticed too. What? Victor didn't answer. At that moment, Samuel's tan pickup came down the ranch road. He parked beside, carrying a map tube and a rolled survey sheet. Victor's eyes locked on him. Samuel looked at the convoy. Well, he said, somebody brought a lot of machinery to the wrong side of a line. Victor stepped forward. What did you find? Samuel looked at me first, not Victor. That mattered. I nodded. He unrolled the survey across the hood of my truck and held one corner down against the wind. The new boundary line was marked in red. Dry Creek Lane sat exactly where we'd always believed it did. Walker Ranch, private, but Samuel's finger didn't stop there. It moved north toward Mesa Vista's rear entrance, then to the culvert, then to the widened shoulder Victor intended to use for Phase 2. 18 feet, Samuel said. Victor went still. Thomas leaned closer. 18 feet of what? Samuel tapped the red line. Mesa Vista improvements over the Walker boundary. Victor said nothing. Neither did I. For years, landscaping, drainage work, and the rear entrance had gradually crept onto land Robert Walker still owned, and Victor's proposed construction connection ran directly through that strip. The trucks behind us suddenly looked less like a show of power and more like evidence waiting on wheels. Victor folded the HOA authorization and put it back in his pocket. Pull the trucks out. The foreman didn't need telling twice. Engines started. One by one, the dump trucks and grader backed away from my gate. Victor stayed until the last one turned toward County Road 16. Then he looked at Samuel, then at me. You'd better be certain about that survey. Samuel rolled the map slowly. That's why they call it surveying. Victor climbed into his truck and left. The dust followed him west. I watched until it settled. The road was still mine. The gate was still standing. But Samuel had just uncovered something bigger than Dry Creek Lane. For years, Mesa Vista had been using 18 feet of Walker Ranch without understanding what Robert Walker had actually allowed. And now Victor Hale had built his Phase 2 plan around land his development didn't own. Samuel spent the rest of that morning checking his work. Twice. By noon, there was no ambiguity. The recorded Walker boundary cut 18 feet inside what Mesa Vista had been treating as its rear edge. Part of their landscaped entrance, one end of a drainage culvert, and the connection Victor planned to widen for Phase 2 all crossed onto Walker Ranch. Rachel arrived before Samuel finished setting the last monument. She studied the survey, then asked the question I hadn't. "How long has this been like this?" Samuel rubbed dust from his glasses, not all at once. The original subdivision plat respected the line. Landscaping crept over later. Culvert was extended after that. Shoulder got widened sometime after Robert's last survey, so Mesa Vista could claim adverse possession. I asked it because I wanted the worst possibility first. Rachel shook her head. "Not if your father gave permission." Samuel looked toward me. "Did he? I don't know." Then I remembered the steel box. We were back at my kitchen table 20 minutes later. Robert had organized legal documents well, but personal correspondence was another matter. Receipts were mixed with handwritten notes, Christmas cards, county notices, and envelopes that had been opened so carefully they looked reusable. Samuel found the letter. Ethan, it was dated nearly 17 years earlier, sent from the Mesa Vista Property Committee to Robert Walker. The HOA had requested permission to extend drainage work slightly beyond its recorded boundary because runoff from Cottonwood Wash had been damaging the rear entrance. Robert's reply was stapled behind it. Short, plain, exactly like him. He permitted the drainage work and continued neighbor access, provided no ownership interest was claimed, no road was widened, and no additional use was created. Rachel read the final sentence twice. "This is excellent," I looked at her. "My father letting them use his land is excellent, legally?" "Yes," she tapped the page. "They can't easily turn tolerated use into hostile possession if Robert expressly documented that the use was permissive." Samuel nodded. "Your dad knew exactly what he was doing. That hit me harder than the survey. For years, I'd thought Robert had simply ignored the rear entrance because 18 feet of desert wasn't worth fighting neighbors over. He hadn't ignored anything. He'd chosen kindness without surrendering the boundary." Rachel placed the letter beside the easement. "Now we have two separate things. 6 households have a recorded seasonal access right over part of Dry Creek Lane. Mesa Vista also received limited permission for certain drainage and neighbor-related use along this 18-foot strip. But no ownership. No ownership. Construction. No. Phase 2. Absolutely not." I looked through the window toward the ranch. My father had left people room to live beside him. Diane and Victor had mistaken that room for weakness. By late afternoon, Rachel sent Canyon Ridge and Mesa Vista formal copies of Samuel's survey and Robert's letter. Victor responded before sunset, not with an apology, with a lawsuit. Rachel called while I was checking cattle. They filed, what are they claiming? Declaratory judgment, easement expansion, prescriptive use. They're arguing Dry Creek Lane has functioned as permanent community infrastructure for decades. I almost laughed. After trying to create that exact history 2 weeks ago, that's going to be one of our arguments. And the 18 feet, they're claiming long-standing use gives Mesa Vista rights there too. I looked toward the fresh survey monument. So they want the judge to turn permission into ownership, essentially. Rachel paused. They're also asking for temporary relief, preventing you from interfering with what they call established access. There was the real move. If Victor couldn't drive construction equipment through my gate voluntarily, he'd try to get a judge to open it. Could he win? Don't underestimate him. That answer was why I trusted Rachel. No promises, no courtroom fantasy, just risk. He has money, she continued. He has lawyers. And he's going to present you as a rancher trying to cut off an entire neighborhood. But I'm not. I know. That's why from this moment forward, you do not interfere with those 6 households' legitimate seasonal access. I never planned to. Good. We make the distinction impossible to miss. Residents weren't the enemy, expansion was. That evening, Grace Miller called. She had already heard about the lawsuit. People in Mesa Vista are saying you're going to lock us out. I'm not. What about Dry Creek? The 6 original properties keep exactly what the recorded agreement gives them. She went quiet. Diane isn't telling people that. I'm not surprised. She says you're trying to use the survey to shut down our rear entrance. I'm trying to stop Victor from turning it into a construction highway. Grace exhaled. I'll testify. That caught me off guard. You understand what that means? Yes, you'll still have to live there afterward. I already have to live there knowing what they did. There are moments when a case changes without a single new document. That was one. We had Robert's deed, the recorded easement, Samuel's survey, the fake authorization, my security footage, Sheriff Reed's report. And now we had a Mesa Vista homeowner willing to explain why the patrol had really come. The next morning, a court notice arrived. Judge Caroline Brooks had set an expedited hearing on Victor's access claim. I placed it beside my father's letter. For decades, Robert Walker had allowed neighbors to cross his land because he believed being decent didn't require being weak. Victor Hale was betting that a judge would see that kindness as surrender. Soon we'd find out whether he was right. And Diane Caldwell still had one version of the story left to tell. Judge Caroline Brooks's courtroom was full by 9. Victor sat behind 2 attorneys in a dark suit. Diane sat beside him, polished and composed. Mark Reynolds was farther back, without the gray tactical vest this time. Rachel leaned toward me. Remember what they're going to do? Make me the villain. Exactly. Victor's attorney did it within 5 minutes. He described Dry Creek Lane as a long-standing community lifeline, and me as a landowner suddenly trying to obstruct families who had depended on it for decades. Judge Brooks looked at Rachel. Does your client dispute the resident's easement? No, Your Honor. The room shifted. Rachel stood. Mr. Walker has never denied the 6 identified households their recorded seasonal passage. What he disputes is the attempt to transform that limited right into HOA enforcement authority and commercial construction access for a new subdivision. She placed Robert's recorded agreement before the judge. Those are 2 very different things. Victor's attorney tried to blur them again. Rachel wouldn't let him. She called Samuel Ortiz. Samuel identified the original plat, Robert's deed, the recorded easement, and his new survey. Who owns Dry Creek Lane? Rachel asked. Walker Ranch. Does Mesa Vista HOA possess general enforcement authority over it? No. Does the easement permit construction traffic? No. Subdivision expansion? No. Road widening? No. Rachel displayed Samuel's survey. And the rear entrance? Part of it, including portions of the drainage and proposed Phase 2 connection, extends approximately 18 feet across the Walker boundary. Victor's attorney stood. Decades of use. Samuel cut his eyes toward him. Use doesn't move a monument. Judge Brooks almost smiled. Then Rachel introduced Robert's old letter expressly permitting limited drainage work without transferring ownership. That killed the idea that Mesa Vista had quietly occupied the strip without permission. Next came Sheriff Thomas Reed. He described arriving at 5:26 that morning and finding Mark's men blocking my gate. Rachel handed him the laminated authorization. What did your records check establish? The number belonged to an unrelated drainage inspection closed 6 years earlier. Did Mesa Vista possess county enforcement authority? No. Did you order the patrol to leave? Yes. Mark stared at the floor. Then Grace Miller took the stand. Diane finally looked nervous. Grace described the closed-board meeting, Victor's Phase 2 maps, the discussion about creating a history of community control, and Diane's statement that pressure might make me more reasonable. Victor's attorney attacked her memory. You took no recording of this meeting, correct? Correct. No official minutes contain those words? Not that I've seen, so we're relying on your recollection. Grace looked directly at him. No. You're relying on my courage to finally repeat it in public. Nobody moved. Rachel stood again. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce Exhibit 24. Diane turned toward Victor. That movement told me the exhibit mattered before I knew what it was. Rachel placed an email on the courtroom screen, Sender. Diane Caldwell. Recipients included Mark Reynolds and Victor Hale. Date, 2 days before the fake patrol blocked my gate. Rachel read only the relevant section. Once Phase 2 equipment begins making regular trips over Dry Creek Lane, Walker will have a much harder time claiming the road isn't already community infrastructure. Silence, not confusion, recognition. The entire scheme fit inside one sentence. Judge Brooks looked over her glasses. Ms. Caldwell, did you write this? Diane's attorney stood. Your Honor, I asked Ms. Caldwell. Diane swallowed. Yes, but the context. What context makes Phase 2 construction equipment equivalent to the 6 households identified in the recorded easement? Diane hesitated. We were trying to secure reliable emergency access. Rachel stepped forward. With dump trucks? Diane's face tightened. Victor's attorney objected. Judge Brooks overruled him. Rachel placed the timeline on the screen. Closed board meeting, Diane's email, fake patrol, false county authorization, 14-day gate removal demand, Victor's permanent access offer, coordinated complaints, formal notice from Rachel, then the construction convoy, one event after another, not random, not misunderstanding, a sequence. Rachel turned toward Diane. Your HOA new construction traffic wasn't authorized, didn't it? Diane looked at Victor. That was her mistake. Rachel saw it. Judge Brooks saw it. So did I, Diane, Rachel said quietly. Who told you regular construction use could help establish broader control over the road? Victor's attorney shot to his feet. Objection. Judge Brooks considered him, then looked at the documents spread across her bench. I've heard enough for today. My stomach tightened. The judge closed the file. She looked first at Diane, then Victor, then me. I think we've finally established who this road belongs to. Victor went completely still. But Judge Brooks wasn't finished. She looked at Rachel. There remains a question this court will not ignore. Rachel waited. The 6 households. That was the opening Victor's side had been waiting for. His attorney immediately rose. Exactly, Your Honor. Any ruling restricting access could isolate. Judge Brooks raised one hand. He stopped. I didn't ask you. She looked at me. Mr. Walker, if this court confirms your ownership and rejects the expanded access claim, what do you intend to do when Cottonwood washed floods and those 6 families need Dry Creek Lane? I didn't look at Rachel. I didn't need to. Open my gate. Diane turned toward me. Judge Brooks studied my face. Even after all of this? Their rights were never the problem. The courtroom stayed quiet. I looked toward Victor. People trying to turn those rights into something they weren't. That's the problem. Judge Brooks nodded once. Then she gathered the documents into a neat stack. I'll issue my ruling. The hearing ended. Outside, nobody celebrated. Not yet. Victor walked past without looking at me. Diane followed several steps behind him, her face pale. The email had destroyed their story. Now only one question remained. Would the judge merely stop Phase 2 from using my road, or finally force Mesa Vista to respect every boundary it had crossed? The answer came 4 days later. Rachel called before breakfast. Check your email. I opened the court order at my kitchen table with Robert's steel document box sitting beside me. 32 pages. I didn't need all 32. Rachel gave me the part that mattered. You won. Judge Caroline Brooks confirmed Walker Ranch's ownership of Dry Creek Lane and rejected Victor Hale's claim that decades of limited neighbor access had somehow transformed it into permanent community infrastructure. The 6-household easement remained exactly what Robert Walker had signed: seasonal, residential, limited. No construction traffic, no commercial expansion, no road widening, no public dedication, and no HOA enforcement authority anywhere on Walker Ranch. I read that paragraph twice, then I reached the next section. Mesa Vista was ordered to remove the portions of its rear entrance improvements and drainage structures encroaching across Samuel Ortiz's surveyed boundary unless I voluntarily agreed to a lawful alternative. I didn't, Rachel laughed when I told her. Didn't think you would. What about the fence and the calf? The order preserves your claims for damages from the original trespass, property damage, veterinary costs, and related expenses. And Mark? Separate matter. Sheriff Reed's office referred the false authorization and patrol operation for investigation. I leaned back. For weeks, Diane and Victor had tried to make the fight look complicated. It wasn't anymore. The line had been measured, the documents had been read. The difference between permission and ownership had survived every lawyer they put against it. Then Rachel told me the part that hurt Victor most. Phase 2 can't use Dry Creek Lane. So what's his alternative? The southwest route. I remembered Samuel's map: bad grade, drainage crossing, additional review, expensive engineering. How expensive? Expensive enough that Canyon Ridge has asked the county to delay its Phase 2 application. That was as close to collapse as a development project usually sounded. Victor hadn't lost the right to develop land he legally controlled. He had lost the shortcut through mine. And that was the entire point. 2 nights later, Grace called. Mesa Vista had held an emergency membership meeting. Diane Caldwell was removed as president. The vote wasn't close. Residents weren't angry because I'd beaten their HOA. They were angry because Diane had used their association, their dues, and their legitimate access rights as cover for Victor's private development deal. Mark resigned from his HOA position before the meeting ended. Sheriff Reed later told me the fake patrol paperwork remained under investigation. No dramatic handcuffs, no television cameras, just consequences moving at the speed consequences usually move, on paper, through offices, one signature at a time. A week later, contractors arrived at Mesa Vista's rear entrance. This time they stayed on their side of the survey monuments. Samuel stood beside me while they pulled landscaping away from the 18-foot strip and marked the culvert section that had to be corrected. He looked at Robert's old fence. Your dad could have fought them over this years ago. I know. He chose not to. He chose to be a neighbor. Samuel nodded. Different thing from giving it away. That was the lesson Diane never understood. Neither had Victor. They thought every kindness was an unclaimed asset. Every accommodation was weakness. Every silence was consent. They were wrong. The damaged cedar fence at the north gate went back up. The calf recovered enough to move with the herd again, and for the first time since Mark Reynolds showed up wearing fake authority across his chest, I stopped checking the gate camera every time my phone vibrated. Then the summer storms came. Cottonwood Wash filled fast. Water cut across the regular Mesa Vista route by late afternoon. At 5:17, headlights appeared outside my north gate. Grace Miller. She stopped before the cattle guard and waited. I walked down through the wet dirt and opened the gate. She lowered her window for a second. Neither of us said anything. Then she looked past me toward Dry Creek Lane. After everything they did, you're still letting us through? I rested one hand on the gate. Your right to cross was never the problem. She looked toward the fresh survey monument beside my father's old fence. The problem was people who couldn't understand where their rights ended. Grace nodded. Thank you, Ethan. Get home before the wash rises any higher. She drove through. I watched her taillights follow Dry Creek Lane toward Mesa Vista. Then I closed the gate behind her. Slow, metallic click. Nothing dramatic. No victory speech. No cheering crowd. Just a gate doing what it had always done. Protecting one man's land without denying another person's lawful right to cross it. The wind moved through the wet grass. Cattle settled beyond the fence. Somewhere toward Cottonwood Wash, water moved through the desert in the darkness. I put my hand on Robert's old cedar post. For most of my life, I'd thought property lines were about ownership. After Diane Caldwell and Victor Hale, I understood them differently. A boundary tells you where your power stops. That's true for a rancher, it's true for a developer, and it ought to be true for an HOA. They came to my gate pretending to represent the law. They tried paperwork, pressure, complaints, construction equipment, and a courtroom. In the end, the law didn't give me anything that wasn't already mine. It simply made them respect the line they had chosen to cross.
And maybe that's the lesson worth carrying home. Knowing your right matters, but knowing the difference between a right or favor matters just as much. My father let neighbors rot his plan when Cottonwood was flooded because helping people was the decent thing to do. He also put that permission in writing, kept the boundary clear, and never confused kindness with surrendering ownership. Years later, those on papers matter. Standing your ground doesn't always mean raising your voice. Sometimes it means keeping the camera running, saving the letter, finding the deed, calling the right people, and having enough patience to let the facts speak to you. What mattered most wasn't keeping everybody outside my gate. It was protecting the boundary while still opening the gates for the sick families who had a legitimate right to rest. That's the kind of justice I can live with, firm enough to protect what's yours, decent enough to respect what's there. If you ever deal with an HOA, a property line dispute, or somebody who misunderstood where their authority ended, type 1 in the comments. If you have never had to deal with anything like that, type 0. I'd like to see how common these experiences really are. And if stories about ranches, property rights, ordinary people, and quiet perseverance are your kind of thing, you are welcome to subscribe and stay with us. There will be another story waiting down the road.